By 1990, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a household name. You've all heard of Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Everybody's heard of Arnold? He's all over your house. Sam loved Arnold's. Well, Sam was kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger with his bodybuilding stuff, yeah. Arnold Schwarzenegger was a household name by 1990. He had already been working in TV and theater for, about 15 years by that time. And so even though he started out as an Austrian bodybuilder, he had become a pretty famous actor by the year 1990. He had appeared in some pretty good films too. A lot of them, they had to do with his outstanding physique. He didn't have a whole lot to do with anything except he had this amazing body, right? And so you can even hear it in the names of the characters that he played. For instance, he played Hercules in New York. That sounds like a pretty tough dude, right? He played Conan in Conan the Barbarian and its sequel, Conan the Destroyer. He played Terminator in the Terminator movie. He played John Matrix in a movie called Commando. And anybody whose name is John Matrix in Commando, you know he's got to be tough, right? And then, of course, he played a guy named Dutch in Predator and went up against an alien that was out to kill everybody. Arnold also began branching out into other types of roles. In 1987, I think it was, he played Julius in the movie Twins, and he was the genetically engineered uber-human twin of Danny DeVito's slimeball character Vincent. You might remember that one. Danny was a common petty thief guy, not awesome in any respect, and then standing next to the 6-foot-plus Arnold Schwarzenegger, he looked extremely short and pathetic. It was kind of a fun role if you've ever seen that movie. But I got to be honest with you, I would probably argue that it wasn't until 1990's Kindergarten Cop that we really began to see the full scope of just what Arnold Schwarzenegger could do as far as acting. And as you look at this, if you've seen this movie, you probably remember the basic premise. This tough cop is having to pose as a kindergarten teacher in order to track down a bunch of mafiosos who are selling drugs and trying to kill people and all this other stuff. And you might even remember how the first day of his class went. And I went online and I found a video of how his first day of class went. So I wanted to share that with you this morning just so that we all kind of remember what it was like to be a cop turned kindergarten teacher. Here's what we've got. Hold on. Go back. It didn't change the thing.
Extremely fun. We're going to play one.
Try that again. No, go back. Come on. It shouldn't be this difficult. I practiced it earlier and it worked great.
Now we are going to do something extremely fun. We're going to play a wonderful game called Who is My Daddy and What Does He Do? Yes?
Is your daddy a fireman? He's probably big. Is he a wrestler? Is he a basketball coach?
No.
What's the matter?
I have a headache.
It might be a tumor.
It's not a tumor. It's not a tumor at all.
It's not a tumor. It's not a tumor at all. One can hardly blame John Kimball for having a headache. I mean, he's a cop. He's not used to dealing with kindergarten kids and all their questions and fun things that they have going on. So a headache, he gets a headache. And a headache does not necessarily mean you have a tumor, right? We all get that, except kindergartners, they can jump to that conclusion. Over the last few weeks, we've been discussing the church. We've been kind of examining the church, exploring what it is, what it's not, and we've learned quite a bit along the way. You might remember the church is not a building, but it's a people. So wherever we go, whatever we do, whenever we do it, we are the church, right? We are the church. It's not this place. It's not this time. It's not even this action that we're doing right now. We're it. And we discovered that the church is not a common people, but rather it's a holy people. We're not supposed to act like everybody else. Instead, everything we say and everything we do is supposed to be driven by a love for God and a love for people. That's what it is to be holy, according to Jesus. That's the greatest command. And so we're supposed to be defined by love. And we discovered also that the church is not a monument, but rather a springboard. That is, we're not supposed to sit around and commiserate over how amazing things used to be, but instead we're supposed to recognize that everything that has come before in our lives, God is using that to set us up so that we can do amazing things for Him in the days to come. And that's all good stuff, but the truth is, if we're going to look to what comes next, we also need to consider how we're going to get there. And that's an important consideration because, well, the truth is, if left to our own devices, the church, we would probably tear ourselves apart. Don't believe me? Well, that's exactly what was going on in the church at Corinth when the Apostle Paul wrote his first surviving letter to that church. In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, we discover right away, it's been maybe 3 years after Paul had planted this church. So 3 years, that's it. And yet we discover right away that they were already bickering back and forth over which preacher, leader, person was better. Was it Paul? Was it Apollos? Was it Cephas? Was it Jesus? Which one was better? We're fighting over that. Then, as if that wasn't bad enough, in chapter 7 we discover that the argument that who was best leader was just the tip of the iceberg. And even though the first letter that the Corinthians wrote to us, we don't have it today, as Paul was writing this particular section, you can almost hear the words. You can almost hear the Corinthians asking, "So Paul, we need you to settle something for us. We've been debating, discussing. Well, really, we've been arguing about this and that and the other. And we need you to tell us what's right. Who's right here? It's got to be me, right?" You can almost hear that in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. And that continues almost all the way to the end of the book. Because you see, the church at Corinth was arguing over everything from marriage to matters of conscience and Christian liberty, from how you're supposed to do the Lord's Supper, which we're going to do here in a few moments. And starting in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, they were even arguing over spiritual gifts. Now, from what we gather over the next couple of chapters, chapter 12, 13, and into 14, the fight was primarily over it was pretty predictable, really. Someone decided that if we're all going to serve the same God, then we should all have the same gifts and use them in the same way. And of particular interest, it would seem that they had decided that the gift of languages or tongues, because the Christians at Pentecost had begun exhibiting this ability to speak in other languages in Acts chapter 2, they decided that everybody should be able to speak in different languages. And so it became a sort of uniform, this idea of tongues and this gift of being able to speak in foreign languages. That word uniform is defined by Google to mean not changing in form or character, but rather remaining the same in all cases and at all times. And that's a pretty important term for us today because we all recognize what a uniform is, right? In sports, in the military, at work, wherever we might be, we probably see uniforms somewhere being used to ensure a consistent appearance so that everybody, at a simple glance, can instantly recognize that, yes, this person is part of the group. And exactly that's the point. Everyone is the same. And if you're not the same, well, then you don't belong. But I have to tell you something. Paul is pretty clear about this in chapter 12, and we're going to see this as we go here. But the church is not uniform. We're not all the same. If you don't believe me, look at how it plays out here in verses 4, 5, and 6 of 1 Corinthians chapter 12. In 1 Corinthians 12, verse 4, we read, "Now there are different gifts, but the same Spirit." Now, in general, we understand this to mean that there are different God-given abilities. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that this is true. Paul noted, starting in verse 7, the gifts of wisdom, the ability to take all that is known and figure out what needs to be done, what should be done. He noted the gift of knowledge, the ability to study and learn and know about stuff. He noted also the gift of faith. Now there's faith that we're all supposed to have, this belief that Jesus saves, but then there's this gift of faith, which is an exceptional degree of faith, above and beyond what most people normally have. To that he adds things like the gifts of healing, performing miracles, prophecy, distinguishing between spirits, speaking in different kinds of languages, interpretation of languages. And if you go on down in the chapter a little further, there's a few other things that he throws in there as well. Now, it's tempting for us to go through this list and ask, well, which gift do you have? And ask for a show of hands. And if you need help identifying which gifts you have, we have some tools that we can help you with that. So if that's the case, please talk to me after the service. But the thing is, this isn't an exhaustive list, right? Paul wasn't listing this gift to say, these are the gifts that you can choose from. You have to choose one of these and this is it. This is all there is. No, that's not what he's after. In fact, we find other gifts that the Apostle Paul lists elsewhere in Scripture. And so we discover that there's probably not a single exhaustive list of spiritual gifts anywhere in the Bible. And that makes us ask, okay, so why is he giving this list? And the answer to that is, I believe Paul's objective is not to figure out which gifts different people have, but rather to say that you can have any number of gifts. The Spirit of God gives to different people different kinds of gifts. Isn't that what he just said? The singular Spirit, the same Spirit, gives different gifts to all sorts of different people. He then builds on this in verse 5. There are different ministries, but the same Lord. Different people have different God-ordained jobs or tasks to perform. For instance, my ministry might be to preach. Some of you might dispute that and say that I probably shouldn't be up there, and that's your call, I guess. But that doesn't mean Nicole's gift is preaching. I got to be honest with you. We've had discussions at our house when I haven't felt well or something's been going on, and we've discussed, Nicole could just take my notes and she could go up in the pulpit and she could preach for me. And her response is always, yeah, no. Not happening, not a chance, not on your life, never going to happen, just write it off, not an option. That's pretty much how it goes, okay? Her gift is not to preach. Now, put her in a classroom teaching people, or put her behind a piano, as you saw a few moments ago, and she's pretty gifted at those, and I'm not so gifted at especially the piano thing. But here's the thing, even people with the same gifts might employ those gifts in a different way, don't you think? For instance, you might have the gift of teaching. But do you teach toddlers? That's a special gift, don't you think? It takes a special gift of teaching to teach kindergartners, like Arnold Schwarzenegger was doing. I'll also say this, it takes a special kind of gift to teach teenagers. Am I right? And I dare say sometimes it takes a special kind of gift to teach grown-ups, because grown-ups are kind of like cats. You ever try to herd cats? Doesn't always work that well. Yeah. You could take the gift of knowledge or the gift of wisdom. Maybe you have the gift of knowledge and wisdom and it's in mechanical matters. You're really good at fixing things. Maybe your ministry then would be as a trustee or a handyman. Then again, you might have the gift of knowledge and wisdom in financial matters. And I don't know about you, but I would rather not have my accountant or my treasurer working on the furnace. Probably not a great plan. Maybe Harry is good at that. I don't know. I've never seen Harry working on the boiler downstairs. That seems to be other people's jobs. But Harry's pretty darn good at money, and he knows what he's doing. So I got to say, you can have different gifts. And even within those different gifts, you can have different specific focal points. The key here is that whatever your gift, God gave it to you to be used for His glory. Right? So whether your gift is knowledge and wisdom, teaching, Maybe your gift is hospitality. You're really good at making people feel welcome. Maybe your gift is cooking or embroidering or fashioning wood carvings or any of the things that we saw in Exodus 31 a little bit ago. Whatever your gift is, use it for God's glory, because that's what God has given it to you to use it for. And he continues into verse 6. And there are different activities, but the same God activates each gift in each person. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Different gifts, different ministries, different results. That's what the word activities is really emphasizing here. Strong's defines it as the thing wrought, the effect operation, how it's working itself out in real life. So the idea is that even people with the same gifts, even the same ministries, might do things differently. In fact, I have a good friend. He's a pastor just a few blocks from here. And in some aspects, our personalities and our gift sets are very, very similar. But he does things very differently than I do. It's the truth, isn't it? Sometimes we do things differently. Sometimes we do the same things in different ways. Sometimes we do the same thing the same way, but we still get different results. That's the point Paul's trying to make, isn't it? Different gifts, different ministries, different activities. For the Corinthians, this was a difficult thing to swallow. I mean, they wanted to hang out with people who were just like themselves. And I got to be honest, sometimes we like that too, don't we? It's a whole lot easier to hang out with somebody who's just like me, because if they're just like me, then we think the same way, we enjoy the same things, we like to do the same stuff. Boy, it just works out better when everybody just does things my way, don't you think? Some of you are shaking your head because you realize that that's not possible. That doesn't happen. There's not such a relationship on this earth. The Corinthians, they wanted to hang out with people who had the same gifts. They wanted to exclude anybody who wasn't just like them. They wanted the church to be uniform, but our singular God created different people with different gifts to do different things and get different results. Because the church is not uniform. Instead, Paul offers the illustration of the human body to help us understand. In 1 Corinthians 12, verse 12, he says, "For as the body is one and has many parts, and all the parts of that body, though many, are one, so also is Christ." Basically, he's saying just like your body has hands and feet and eyes and ears, and yet they're all part of the singular body, that's the same way it is with the body of Christ, which is the church. He goes on again in verse 14, "So the body is not one part, but it's many," and that's important. Because if this is true, then we have to begin to recognize that no single part of the body is unimportant. Don't believe me? Well, look at 1 Corinthians 12, verses 15 and 16. If the foot should say, "Because I'm not a hand, I don't belong to the body." And how would that work for you if that really happened? You're a foot and you look at the rest of the body and you say, "Yeah, I'm not a hand, so I must not be as good as the rest of this. So I'm going to just walk off and not do anything." Yeah, the rest of the body is kind of stuck then, isn't it? I mean, literally stuck. Because without a foot, you can't really walk. Or at least it gets a lot more challenging to do so. He says, what if the ear should say, "Because I'm not an eye, I don't belong to the body"? Wouldn't that be a fun one? All of a sudden you can't hear because your ear decided, "You know what, I'm not an eye, so I'm not as good as the rest of the body. I can't hang out with these guys. I'm just going to walk off and do my own thing." Wouldn't that be a fun job? Anybody like being deaf? Of course not. We don't like being deaf. We invest insane amounts of money on hearing aids so that we can hear, right? Hearing aids are not cheap. Did you know that? It's crazy. They're not cheap at all. For the Corinthians, this was a challenging thing. Basically, they were saying that, you know what, if I don't have this particular set of gifts, or this particular gift, then I must not be a part of the body of God. Paul's response is, maybe I don't have the gift of tongues, but that doesn't mean I'm useless. And maybe I don't have the gift of faith or healing or miracles, but that doesn't mean I don't belong. Because the truth is, the body needs every single one of its parts. If you don't believe me, you can ask medical science. How many of you have ever had your appendix removed? Why? Because the appendix is a useless part of the body, right? Except it's not. Did you know that in the last 10 years, doctors have been discovering that the appendix actually does have a purpose? They believe now that it is used to make sure that there's good bacteria in your gut and to maintain the levels of good bacteria. So it helps you digest things. And it helps your immune system. And it helps with any number of other stuff. Even the appendix has a purpose in our body. And if that's the case, I dare say that even your gift, even my gift, has a purpose in the church. The flip side of that is, well, if the body is not one part but many's, then no part is more important than the others, right? In verse 21, we see this was also going on in the Corinthian church. So the eye can't say to the hand, I don't need you. Or again, the head can't say to the feet, I don't need you. Basically, he's saying no one part of the body is so awesome, so important, that it can look at the rest of the body and say, I don't need any of you guys. So the preacher is not so awesome that he can be the church without the greeter. The prophet or the apostle or the Sunday school teacher is not so spectacular that she can be the church without the cleaner. And in fact, I dare say some of the more important roles in the church, just like in the human body, are those that are hidden away. The ones that we like to think of as less important. Could you imagine what would happen if the cleaners failed to show up and do their job at the church? Who here would like to go and have this place look like a disaster area? Well, sometimes it still looks like a disaster area, even when the cleaners come by, because sometimes we're messy. But what if they didn't come by at all? What if you went in the bathroom and there was no toilet paper anywhere to be found? Or what if you went into the kitchen and there was food left all over the place every time? Sometimes it's the people that you don't necessarily see on stage that are doing the most important jobs. See what I'm saying? Every one of us has a gift, and none of us can look down on the others and say, I don't need you because I'm bigger, I'm better, I'm more important than you. And here's the other thing about this. If the body is many parts but still one, we have to recognize that we're all in this together. If you don't believe that one, take a look at verses 24, 25, and 26. God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the less honorable, so that there would be no division in the body, but that the members would have the same concern for each other. So if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. And if one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. Basically, it's saying we should all share in the victories. We should all join in the defeats. We must all work together to be the church God is calling us to be. To do the things God is calling us to do. And I have to tell you guys this morning, we have some reason to celebrate, and we also have some reason to hurt. There are good things going on in our midst, and there are some not so good things. One of the good things this week, a person here today was honored because of the work of his business. Dominic Matthews was honored the other day, and he hasn't even got his certificate yet for being nominated Business of the Year by Des Moines Neighbors. That's pretty awesome. On the flip side, there is a person who is not here today who is really, really hurting. And we have to hurt with them too. Dealing with some physical issues and some mental issues and some family issues and a bunch of other stuff, but we need to be praying for the people that aren't here, because there's a good chance that they're hurting, and we should hurt with them because we're in this together. That's what he says, isn't it? There's no division in the body. If one suffers, we all suffer. If one's honored, we're all honored. We're in this together. It doesn't matter if you're black or white, red, yellow, green, purple, polka dot. It doesn't matter if you're smart or dumb, good looking, tall, short, whatever it is. We're in this together. And here's another thing that this means. We're all called to grow together. Isn't that what a body does? When you were young, your body grew this way, right? Now that we're older, our bodies tend to grow this way, and sometimes that's not so awesome. But the truth is, we're all called to grow. That's what living organisms do. We either grow physically or mentally or spiritually. Somehow we're supposed to be growing. Paul brings this to our attention in verse 31. He says, desire the greater gifts, and I will show you an even better way. This greater gifts idea. Whatever gift we have, we should ask for more. Yes, I have the gift of tongues, but I would like to have the gift of healing. Yes, I have the gift of healing, but I would like to have the gift of prophecy. Yes, I have the gift of prophecy. I would love to be having wisdom and knowledge and all this other stuff. Now, for the record, I don't have all of those gifts. I'm just using them as an example. But that's the point, isn't it? Wherever we are, whatever gift we have, we should ask for the next one up, or 2 up, or 3 up, or 5 up, or all the way at the very top. Paul says we should be seeking prophecy because it's the most important of all the gifts. Prophecy, of course, was serving as the mouthpiece of God, delivering His word to His people. Wouldn't that be an awesome thing if we had a prophet in the house? Whatever gift we have, we should ask for more. But also, whatever gift we have, we should work to improve it. We can't denigrate what we already have just because we want something bigger and better. No. So whether your gift is tongues, or prophecy, or whatever it might be, we got to be saying, God, help me to make this stronger. Help me to get better at using this. And that's a big deal, because the truth is, a lot of us, we see this as a spiritual gift, and so we just sit on it and we do nothing with it. When in reality, God wants us to be working on it all the time. And then there's one other thing that we have to catch from this particular verse. And that's that whatever gift we have, there is something even better. Isn't that what Paul said in verse 31? And I will show you an even better way. He's gone through all of these gifts, and he said, that one that you really want to have is prophecy, and there's all these other gifts, and that's great, and you can have each of them, and every one of them has their place, and this is good. Basically, he diffused the argument that was going on in Corinth. And this is the answer to their question. Which is the most important spiritual gifts? Which of the spiritual gifts am I supposed to have? This is the answer right here in chapter 12. But at the end of it, he says, but wait, it's like an infomercial. There's more. Before you go saying this is as good as it gets, I need you to recognize that there is something more important. And if you flip the page into 1 Corinthians chapter 13, you begin to see that the most excellent thing, the most important thing that we have to have is, anybody know what's in 1 Corinthians 13? Love. You might remember 1 Corinthians 13. It's one of the more familiar passages in the Bible. Part of it goes, love is patient, love is kind. It does not boast, doesn't envy, and goes on and describes what love is supposed to look like. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13 that if you have any of the spiritual gifts but you don't have love, it's basically worthless. And he does that in fairly graphic fashion. It's a good passage to read and remind ourselves that we need love more than anything else. But that's the point, isn't it? Whatever gift we have, love is more important. Whatever gift we have to have love. And there's a reason I think that's the most important thing. Because without love, it's really hard to get along with people. Have you ever noticed that? If you don't decide at some point that you're going to love other people, it's really hard to get along with other people, because at some point they're going to disappoint you. At some point they're going to upset you. At some point they're going to do something that hurts you. And so at that point you're going to be like, you know what, it's better for me to just go my own way and be on my own without you, right? But if we love one another, it draws us back together. And that's essential because, as we already saw, The foot can't say to the eye. The head can't say to the foot. We need each other. We are a body. The church is a body with all its different pieces, all its different parts, doing all of their different functions, but doing them all together. A whole bunch of different parts, each arranged by our singular God, doing all these different tasks with all these different results, and yet all committed together to accomplishing one thing. If you think about it, it makes sense. For me to walk across this stage today, it takes my thigh muscles working together with my knees and my calves and my feet. My arms move to maintain my balance. My heart moves to pump blood. My lungs inhale and exhale so that they all have oxygen and they continue to function. And somehow my mouth continues to move, much to your amazement, I am sure. Some of you got it. Maybe it's more of your frustration, I don't know. We need all of our different parts. Every single one of us is important in the body of Christ. And so the question is, what part are you? Maybe your part is preaching. You want me to sit down, I'll let you preach. Maybe your part is teaching. Maybe your part's cleaning. Maybe your part's cooking. We had some good cooks this week, made cupcakes. Thanks. Maybe your part's fixing things or building things. Maybe your part's running the money. Maybe your part is shaking hands, making people feel welcome. What's your part? Because your part is important. And if we don't have your part, we're like a body that's missing a part or that has a part paralyzed. We wouldn't like that, to be paralyzed partially, would we? Some of us even know what that's like. Things just don't work quite as well. Not quite as effective that way. The church needs you. It needs your gifts. It needs your ministry. It needs you. God gave all that stuff to you to use for His glory, to accomplish His mission. We need you. So my question again, what part are you? Because we're all a part. Every last one of us is a part of the body of Christ. Would you pray with me today? Lord Jesus, thank you for this morning, your word. Thank you for the chance to open it and see that we're all important. We've all been imbued with gifts and talents that we have to be the church. We thank you for choosing each of us. We thank you for equipping each of us. And we thank